But if we just take the Caribbean, we should be having a conversation about how to make mass sustainable, because I think that it's going to land in our plates where we have to make some decisions. And I'll tell you why. So you might be aware that there's a huge movement to change consumer patterns, consumer behavior in terms of regarding fast fashion, because we know about the negative impacts that fast fashion has on the world. Carnival costuming, carnival fashion falls under the umbrella of the fashion industry. Whereas when governments are now being forced to put regulations on what's imported into the country, you'll find that this will affect the carnival industry too, in terms of what kind of materials we could get, what we could import, what kind of because a lot of the gems are also terrible for the environment. Some of it ends up in the waterways, the glitter. I mean, it's not doomsday I'm preaching. I'm just saying that it's time we have a conversation. Open, bring in young people, let's talk, let's chat, let's see how we could innovate and create a model that's sustainable and that could last for generations to come.
So welcome back to another episode of In We Blood, the podcast that's dedicated to help reignite an appreciation for Caribbean culture and traditions. Today, I'm here with Denise, the founder and creative director of Made Neo, a sustainable fashion brand here in Toronto. And we connected off the In We Blood Instagram DMs. I remember you reached out to me and you were talking about how we need to see like a little bit more sustainability in mass. But before we get there, I would love to talk a little bit about how you even got into like sustainable fashion and upcycling and why that's important to you.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I started doing sustainable fashion in the 80s, doing jewelry from found objects. And it felt very natural. It felt like it's something that was from my culture that we are accustomed doing. I grew up with my grandmother, saving bottles, decorating bottles, adding new drinks to them. And, the whole throwaway kind of one use throwaway attitude didn't really exist when I was younger. It was, I think, much later that started happening. So I was always interested in making and creating because I saw it done. I saw it done around me. My mother made dresses and I was very proud of that. It felt, I felt good. Mm-hmm. And continued in that tradition. I didn't study design, didn't study fashion design, nor any kind of design. I studied psychology and just worked with a lot of people who were practicing artists and artisans, and just, collaborated, learned from them. And up to today, that's my mantra, collaboration. So what I do now is design for Made Neo, and I also do training in sustainable fashion, like in upcycling. I teach people how to repair and reuse and to develop mini collections. I even teach people how to prepare social media stuff, their Instagram pages, it's like so that they could develop a small business where sustainable fashion is concerned.
So before we kind of start talking about, I guess, why sustainable options in Carnival might be something to think about or something that might be important, I want to know more about kind of like what the issue is with the current model, in your opinion.
In my opinion, yeah. I feel like it's saturated. I feel like, we keep seeing the same costumes over and over. I think it's being the essence of design in costuming has been diluted into one kind of genre, if you want to say. It was more like the showgirl look. And that has been repeatedly done. It's been used. It's been, and I think I feel we've reached the end of the line, because if we look at the costuming, maybe the same 20 years ago to now, it's become far less design, far less costume, far less materials, and more plastic materials and a lot of inputs that can't really be recycled, and it's become more like fast fashion, one use and throw away. Some people do try, some bands do try to give people some aspect of their costume that they could keepsake, but that's not really the trend. That's not the main thing that's happening now. And I think that there's a place for that, but I feel like now there's room, because I'm hearing it from younger people, older people. It's not just an old people thing, Some people say it's because you're old, you don't want your body outside, but that's not true though.
I don't want my body outside too much.
I know a lot of young people, they would love to play mass, but they're not going to play mass in that, and they're not going to pay that kind of money for that. So I don't want any quarrel with band leaders or anything like that. There's a space for that. It's a business, and that's their model. But I believe that is an opportunity for new blood. The
Made
new blood
Neo.
that's in we blood.
We're gonna Made Neo it.
Yeah.
Just plug everything in right there.
Yeah. And it's in our blood to be creative. We're born that way. All humans are.
Of course.
But I think for Caribbean people, having had to create from nothing, it's in our DNA, I believe, to create and to rejuvenate things. So I think it's a great opportunity, and I would love to be part of that. I would love to not only design but collaborate with band leaders. I've been talking to a few people, so let's see if something happens. And I think we should start a conversation. This is a good conversation. I believe that it's a good idea for us to, all of the Caribbean people, because we have carnivals all over the Caribbean, all over the world for that matter. But if we just take the Caribbean, we should be having a conversation about how to make mass sustainable. Because I think that it's going to land in our plates where we have to make some decisions. And I'll tell you why.
So tell me why.
So you might be aware that there's a huge movement to change consumer patterns, consumer behavior in terms of regarding fast fashion, because we know about the negative impacts that fast fashion has on the world. Everything is there. I'm not going to give you statistics. YouTube it, Google it, it's all there. And
can you give us kind of like a small idea?
So millions of pounds of waste textiles and garments are exported from the global north into the African continent. One of the main places is Ghana, Accra, and it's cubic feet. I mean, it's so much. Google that, YouTube that. You could have there's videos on the mountains of fashion waste that ends up there. Now, there's a kind of a business model that was created in the past, right? So that small business people could use this secondhand clothes and create a secondhand market. But now there's so much of this waste that a large percentage of it is ending up in the landfills. You just can't do anything with it. So there's a big push for the global north to change consumer their patterns, buying patterns, but also the fashion industry has a seriously affected other parts of the world in terms of its workers. So in countries like Bangladesh, India, Sri Lanka, where cheap labor is used for garment construction, there's a big pushback. Workers are on strike, and even in the global north and in Europe, people are they're activists against this industry that. I should say it's an industry that's based on a particular model of, a heavily capitalistic model, right? Which, or shareholder model, which is just all about the shareholders and how they, and the amount of profits that they make. So there's a number of things going on.
Okay.
Carnival costuming, carnival fashion falls under the umbrella of the fashion industry. So whereas when governments are now being forced to put regulations on what's imported into the country, you'll find that this will affect the carnival industry too, right? In terms of what kind of materials we could get, what we could import, what kind of because a lot of the gems are also terrible for the environment. Some of it ends up in the waterways, the glitter, so I mean, it's not doomsday I'm preaching. I'm just saying that it's time we have a conversation, open, bring in young people, let's talk, let's chat, let's see how we could innovate and create, a model that's sustainable and that could last, for generations to come.
What ideas do you have right now in terms of, I guess, shifting Carnival to a more sustainable model?
Well, I feel like for me, as things change, as we push for things to change, we have to look at how we can repair and reuse and upcycle. So there's also rentals. I think you and I talked about this one time where there's a young company that I know that are thinking about, upcycling backpacks, for example, that tend to be, I think, an add-on to the costume that costs X amount of dollars. There's no reason why a group of young people can't get together, entrepreneurs, and say, listen, we're going to create a business that's going to offer costume rental. There's costume rentals exist already, but backpack rentals, so that number one, the public can take pictures in that, photo ops, and masqueraders could actually rent it, take their picture. So there's this rental aspect. I mean, and you can't rent a whole costume, obviously, because, of course, it's underwear and all of that. So you're not going to rent that and give it back. But there would be parts of the costume that could probably be rented. Even existing band leaders could try and do that at one point, because, you'll be helping all the masquerader in terms of their budget. And
that's just making me think that they would have to, like you're talking about, it would have to be a conversation, but it's making me think that the entire model of, like, because I know for the band leaders and stuff, it's all about who's going to have the band of the year. Right. And so they're probably trying to think of, like, new ways to be more whatever so they could win. And then they're probably thinking, like, well, why would I bring back the same costume or the same backpack? Like, then I won't be in the standing to win or something like that. So like what would you say to somebody who's thinking like that?
Well, I mean, you could upcycle or reuse. Remember, some of the backpacks have stuff added onto it, right? So the frame is what you're going to reuse, because right now it's thrown away.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, a lot of
because people buy it and then they do whatever with their costume after. I know some people keep it, some people get rid of it.
Yeah, some people keep it, some people get rid of it. But remember, if you keep it, it's the same backpack you had the year before. Yeah. It's not necessarily something interesting.
That's making me think of Village Juicery, how they have the program where if you bring back the bottle, there's like an incentive to bring the bottle back and then get the juice refilled again instead of always buying a new one. Right. So maybe it can be something where it's like you bring back the backpack or something, and then they get to reuse that frame, and then you get a percentage off your costume. There you go.
That's an interesting model, and that's just the rental or the what they call it, a cashback or some kind of incentive to bring back. And that's one thing. And then we have to look at the reusing, thinking about reusing at the point of design. So at the point of design, you want to think about what kind of materials am I using, right? So that if this material is to be used again, we want it to be of a certain quality. We want it maybe not to be plastic. And also the design, not only the inputs, but design. Why are we so, hung up on, or not hung up, but we have this really close relationship with feathers. Like, I always think about that. It's like every backpack, no matter what the name of the costume, is loaded with feathers. So I get that historically in Trinidad Mass, and probably Caribbean Mass, but I talk about Trinidad because that's what I know. There's the Indian, right? The Apache, the Indian, that's our big mass. That mass was played right every year is considered one of the characters, the old traditional characters. And so those were made with feathers, right? The headpieces in particular, but they also had the whole other aspect of it. And so I could see where that came from. But we went from this beautiful headpiece image to constantly every single year, no matter what the theme of the band is. It could be a water theme, and everything will have a feather. So there's a showgirl idea, and I'm not bashing it. I'm just saying that exists, but there's room to start thinking about what kind of costuming can we add to this beautiful thing that we have called Carnival.
And it's refreshing to see when backpacks are made from something other than feathers, because you're still able to be creative. You're still able to get that like volume and shape and things like that. I remember last year I saw a costume with Vibes mask last year for Spice mask, and the backpack was made of fans, like the Asian style fans, because of the section. It was like, I don't know, like Kyoto or something like that. And the back, there's no feathers. It was just like these beautiful fans of the backpack. And I was like, that is so refreshing and cool to see something other than feathers being used for a backpack. I personally don't really care to wear backpacks because I just want to free up myself. So sometimes after a while, it gets kind of like, get this off me. But I love to see when there's like other things used, because it can still be beautiful and costuming and amazing, but it doesn't always have to be feathers. I agree.
Yeah, and that would be the design challenge. How do I design something using other kinds of materials that could, cater to the needs of the environment and the people that make these textiles, right? Could really have a positive impact there, and still be a costume.
I think what the challenge is sometimes too, though, is like when something is already established, like feathers are already established. So people are probably like, maybe designers or section leaders are probably already thinking like, well, the masqueraders are not going to want me to go and do something totally different. Like, this is my bread and butter. This is my business. Like, I need to make sure that I'm making money. So I'm just going to do what I know works. And then you kind of stay in that same loop where it's like people are starting to say like, all the costumes are the same. It looks the same every year, but just different colors kind of thing, So and like you said, it just needs to be a conversation where we actually talk about it. And then maybe in the comments, maybe some masqueraders will say, hey, I'm actually tired of wearing feathered backpacks. I would love to do something else. Or, I think it's important that there's like a two-way conversation that happens. And I think that's the beautiful thing about In We Blood, is that it kind of opens up this space for everybody to be able to have a conversation, because before we never really had that opportunity. So yeah, I don't really know, because I feel like this is a really good discussion for a panel, because then you get to hear from all sides, right? Like you get to hear like the masqueraders who are saying like, we want more coverage, or no, we like it how it is, or the designers who are saying we want to keep it with feathers, and like just all the different perspectives. I think it would be really cool to have like a panel discussion on the sustainability of Carnival in all aspects of sustainability, environmental sustainability, like whatever other sustainability, like how do we make sure to keep it in Toronto? Like we're having issues with the financials to be able to keep it, like those kinds of things. That's just an idea that's coming to me
and
now.
I think allowing a new generation of people to take the spotlight. I think that, maybe I'm not involved enough, but I would really love to see that we journey with younger people, and not only age-wise, but younger thinking people, I should say, who, we are open to change and, willing to use technology for the right reasons. I love what Sugarcane is doing.
Yeah.
I think that it's the only band that I've seen. I may have missed someone, but I like what she's doing in terms of on an educational level, and bringing other players involved, students from, I guess, all walks of life to be involved in Carnival, because you need that. You need those juices, those creative juices.
Shout out to Candace, who was on our earlier episode. Yeah. So I know we were talking earlier, we were talking about sustainability, and I had mentioned that, like a lot of people who grow up in like rural Caribbean or like rural Africa, like sustainability is not, it's not like a concept. It's just a way of life. Like it's just something that is done. And so I don't know. I think I kind of want to, like, where do you think, I guess, part of it got lost?
Yeah. That's a big question, but I mean,
Yeah.
I'll answer it to the best of my ability. As I was telling you earlier, like I grew up, making and reusing, and that was just part of our, and that was in a particular era, right? We were in the Caribbean, colonized. Most of the resources in the colonial times, and probably even now, was taken out of the country. So we were actually left with the dregs, and that's basically how it is. In a capitalist system, that's really how it is. So necessity is the mother of invention, right? There's that term that I always love to use, because if you don't have X, you're going to try to make X, or figure out how to go around the need for X, right? So it's a political and a conversation, and it has to do with colonialism, it has to do with imperialism, and all those words that capitalism, right? So exactly that that created this change, and then you had the Industrial Revolution, and so if in particular Trinidad and Tobago, we went through the oil boom in the 80s. So money, when you have this flow of money and people could buy anything, and this you could import anything you need and anything you want, not need, but anything you want, and that's tied into to the fact that we are very close to the United States, and that ideology of you buy what you want, as much as you want, and so it's kind of trickle down, I think, in the region.
Because I think a lot of times we're not really thinking about like the consequences of like fast fashion as it relates to mass. We're just thinking about like the culture. We're thinking about we want to have fun. We're not really thinking about like, oh, like what's the impact of this? Like where are these feathers coming from? Or like
Right.
where, like what's gonna, because we're not like, programmed to think about sustainability or keeping that like loop closed with upcycling and all those things like that, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I just feel like this conversation is one where it's like we're just able to scratch the surface. And then I think once more people start to recognize like, oh yeah, like maybe we should do something. Because even I was thinking, I was like, as a masquerader, I would love to rent a backpack. Section leaders, please, I would love to rent a backpack, not buy a backpack, come take pictures or whatever, and play my mask in my backline costume.
Right.
Do you know how impractical it is to be trying to maneuver around in all that crowd of people with a big backpack on? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
That's why I particularly like backline. But it's like, if you have the opportunity to rent the costume from the section leader, okay, you're going to make a little extra money because you made the one backpack, but 10 people came and you charged this and this much to take however much pictures. I think that's a start to the sustainability.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not even advocating some big overhaul.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that we need to start having the conversation before other people tell us, right?
Before the people come from the outside and
tell us that, listen, very soon, you're not going to be able to import these kinds of materials made out of plastic, or there may be taxes on importing, higher taxes importing, materials, things made from materials that are toxic or harmful for the environment. And I mean, my personal opinion is that businesses make money, and sometimes in order for businesses to make the change, they have to be threatened somehow. Not threatened, but you know what I mean? Like some kind of tax or some kind of something for them to make the adjustment. And similar to consumers, we will follow suit if something is biting at our dollar, or if we, it's more about the pocket.
Yeah.
But
That's why they say hit them in the pockets.
yeah, but a lot of young people are advocates. There's the clean clothes campaign. There's Fashion Impact. There are lots of different organizations that are led by young people that are advocating for change. So, and I think that's an amazing thing. And
maybe there will eventually be some sort of like organization that's like directly about like Carnival and sustainability in the community. I think that might be
I think it's important because if we look at it, as far as I know, the Carnival in Toronto brings in about 1 million people or something like that, I think. And I'm sure there's a few thousand people that play mass. Just from an event perspective, right? There's also the sustainability aspect of who comes in and the trash that remains, what remains, So just like they say, no one-use plastic bottles or cups and stuff in festivals, which is happening in the other parts of the world. I don't know if it has happened here yet. We could start to think about what we do as producers of mass and as wearers of mass. Start to think about these things because we're hearing it, but it involves us too. So the conversation has to come from all the stakeholders, and it's not something to be afraid of. It's something to embrace because there's an opportunity, right? I don't see this as a kind of threat to like the existence of Toronto Carnival. I see it as an opportunity to rise and to make statements and to be part of a global trajectory to curb the negative impact of fashion. So, and I think is very possible. I mean, I could see, people, getting together and saying, okay, let's do some interesting pieces that we could have like a feature, presentation to the world, and to lead in that direction, to lead it.
I think sustainability is actually a big conversation because even one of the things that we've discussed on previous episodes is the fact that a lot of the big mass just gets stripped down and just thrown. Like it's sad, but it's like almost every aspect is just single use, just like the one time. And so I know people have mentioned like we need to have a museum or like a place where we can house these works of art for people to come and view them and appreciate them and stuff like that. But now that I'm starting to think about sustainability, I'm starting to think about the ways in which that like a lot of it is not that sustainable, unfortunately, right now. I think they reuse the rods. I'm not sure. I think they strip down like the material and stuff from the big mass, but they do reuse the rods. I'm not certain. But yeah, the sustainability thing, it's like once you start thinking about sustainability, you start realizing like where a lot of change can happen.
Yeah.
But then but then it becomes difficult because it's like, well, then you start thinking about like, well, how realistic is that? Like, you know what I mean? Like, well, we have to do this and we have to do that and it's a competition and da-da-da-da-da. You know what I mean? And then it just kind of becomes like, okay, well, I don't know.
Well, if the thing is, if we don't do it, then there's serious consequences for the future, right? And we have to think about I mean, this is how I think, and this is how I feel. The whole concept of sustainability and circularity in the world for everything is that we think about future generations.
Like I know they talk about 7 generations sometimes, yeah.
So for me, is if I could leave the world a better place in terms of the impact, negative impact on the environment and on people, I'll be a happy person. Yeah, so leaving some kind of dent on the negative impact, right? That we've created. I mean, we have created it. All of us, and is what I'm after, and what I'd hope that people would start thinking. Some of the band leaders have been in business for many, many, many years. They've worked hard. They've created a model and a niche for themselves, and that's good entrepreneurship. I believe in entrepreneurship. I believe in profit making, but I also believe in having a social conscience and being social entrepreneurs. So, and if there's a point where the world is saying, there's so much statistics, so many big players are talking about it. There's science, there's a lot of information about the negative impacts of fashion. Then we just have to stop and say, okay, this is real. Let's see how we could make a dent. I'm not telling anybody to shift and stop their business and go bankrupt. No, I'm saying let's just see how we could create some options.
Okay.
Right? Because I remember we talked about this once too. Having options is also a good way to broaden the consumer base. Right? Because as you were saying earlier, if you don't necessarily want to wear the scanty coverage costumes. What if there were a kind of design sentiment that is more about silhouette, more about form than about nudity, right? And as I said before, I'm not bashing nudity. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that there are options, because I know a lot of people that want to play, that would love to, but they want something that's a costume, but that's not a showgirl costume. Yeah, I mean, there's some bands in Trinidad that have evolved recently. It's just K2K, this Kinetic Mass, and they do a lot more beautiful coverage mass that is, I find to be beautiful.
It is.
So
nice. I remember I saw a Lost Tribes costume this year. I don't know what. And the amazing thing about this costume that I'm talking about, that's something that you can reuse. Like, they have these beautiful skirts, and these necklaces and that's all things that you can go when the mass is done. Yeah, you still have your clothes that you can actually wear.
They're fashion pieces.
Yeah, and they're so cool. Yeah. But it's like, when we're thinking about masks, we talk about the bikini style mask, you don't usually see somebody go and wear that as a bathing suit after.
No.
Yeah.
No.
So sometimes people will reuse the bras, and sometimes they'll wear the wire bras and stuff as a top and stuff like that. But that's about the most that I've seen. I don't really see people wear the full thing to go swim or anything like that,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really interesting to start thinking about the ways in which we can make masks more sustainable. And I think that this is a long-term conversation that's going to continue to evolve over time. Right. And this is just a drop in the bucket, just kind of hey everyone, let's start to think about this.
Well, maybe we'll be able to do that. Build. I think it's important. It's an important conversation, and as Caribbean people, we need to. It's a good place for us to start the conversation amongst ourselves and open up the platform, because we don't own too many other spaces.
Yeah.
Right, in terms of the fashion industry, we don't own too many, but we could claim ownership.
Mass,
for mass. So we could start a conversation.
If there was one thing that you wanted people to know about sustainability as it relates to Carnival, what would you say it is?
I would say one thing as it relates to sustainability. I feel like it's important to use local creativity and local producers, and to build that, but then that's something that's going to
you
affect.
hear the pushback voice.
Not for me, but for the pushback is from the mass, from the band leaders, band owners.
It's every time I make a point, it's I can hear the challenge in my head.
That's
I can
a challenge.
Yeah.
But I also feel that there are possibilities that have not been explored to make those costs effective. To make those costs comparable. But also remember that we have in the region, we have things that we may not be able to find in other spaces. So I think that that's something that we could start to look at. I think that some bands have started doing it in Trinidad.
Started doing what specifically?
Producing more locally. I know
Okay.
that Kinetic Mass started doing it more. I think Tribe is doing some. So there is a conversation about bringing back production at home. But for Canada, that might be even more might be more difficult because production prices costs are even higher here,
Yeah.
right? So this is this is the challenge, and it's not a challenge that can't be discussed and overcome. Production could also be. I think production is a key thing, and even if we were to produce in other parts of the world, we can't just be thinking about cheap labor because then we're guilty. We're guilty of making a mess of people's lives overseas. You know what I mean? It's not like we can't continue to say, well, it's cheaper there and ignore the fact that the majority of producers are women, poor women, under horrible circumstances, horrible conditions, sorry. Very, very low wage, bringing their children to work. It's not a nice thing. So we have to take responsibility for that and start thinking about sustainability in terms of production. And I think that even if we were to produce somewhere else, we could imagine a space that's set up that is fair wages. We are involved. The players are involved. For example, the whole Caribbean carnivals, every month in this period here, there's a Caribbean carnival somewhere, right? Is it impossible for the players to get together and say, okay, we're going to set up a production facility somewhere, right, that we could all use, and figure out the math, figure out the logistics and the costs, because quantity, if more people are buying, right? So have more responsibility with your production facility.
So just like, what do they call, like vertical integration or something like
Yeah.
that? I think that's what that's called. But
Yeah.
I feel like as a business owner, people will be like, well, I'm not going to focus on trying to start a whole new branch and connect with all these people that I don't know. I feel like that would be more something where it's like a group of people would say, okay, we see this gap that's happening. We're seeing
Right.
this sustainability shift happening. Like, let's start up our own thing. Maybe I don't even know how it would work, but like, let's start up something in this part of the world or whatever. And all the bands, you guys come to us. So then that still creates, I guess, that like cycle, like closing the loop in that way.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it's like maybe like our own people or whatever, you know what I mean? But I think it's easy to like sit down and like ideate. And I think it's healthy to do that because we need to start to have the conversation. But I think sometimes it gets a little bit sticky when you start to think about like, okay, well, when we start to think about like making things concrete, like what would that actually look like and how would we actually do that? And not to be like pessimistic or anything like that, but it's just kind of like, that's when it starts feeling like it gets a little bit more difficult when we feel like we're more uprooting things.
Yes.
When like the tree is already established and now it feels like we're trying, that's when it feels
Yeah.
like a little bit more challenging. Yeah.
Well, that's entrepreneurship is risk taking. People.
True.
So the entrepreneurs are the ones that would have to figure that out and say, okay, we're going to make an investment in this. Because already in the region, the carnival circuit, a lot of stuff is produced in Trinidad.
Okay.
A lot of costumes are produced in Trinidad already, and a lot of the players are involved with each other.
Okay.
So they're not as isolated as we think.
Okay.
So I think it's pretty easy for an entrepreneur to say, I'm a carnival entrepreneur. I'm setting up a production facility, let's say in Grenada. Then the governments will have to support. Will have to make it easier for export in the CARICOM. The CARICOM region has I think we have some trade agreements and stuff. No taxes on costumes. That is just to grow, so that we all grow in our carnival. So Grenada saying, okay, we're not going to charge anybody coming in to produce, and all the players come on, say register, blah blah blah. They could produce hair, and
Well, when you discuss it that way, when you think about it that way, it makes sense because a lot of the islands, a lot of their revenue comes from tourism or tourism
Exactly.
products like Carnival. So it would make sense to have that type of incentive, like, okay, yeah, like no tax or whatever, so that something can get established and then people can have jobs. A lot of times people are leaving the Caribbean to go to foreign to be able to get a job or whatever, you know what I mean, to send back money. But it's
Absolutely,
like,
yeah.
if there's something, you know, where they're able to, even if it's like to a different island, sometimes that does happen, but like there's somewhere where you can kind of still stay.
Yeah, so you touched the question you asked me was about if there's one thing I'd like to do to sort of foster sustainability. And the production aspect is a crucial aspect, because what you've just described there is what a big part of sustainability is. Keeping people in your country, keeping people employed, keeping people working, right? Keeping the creativity inside, and growing, you know, your environment, right? Growing, keeping that closed loop, and to offer those services elsewhere too, if anybody wants it.
Yeah, because a lot of times we do see like that brain drain happening where it's like people leave their home country and they go somewhere else in search of new opportunities. And then you have like the mental health piece too, where it's like, well, I came to this place in search of opportunities. Yeah, like, okay, I'm making money, but like I don't feel as good as I felt back home.
Yeah.
You know, I don't have my family, or I'm not able to access the beach or the river or whatever it is that helped me to just feel super good. And here, it's like isolated. Back home, it's a community, you know?
Yeah.
Regardless of whatever crap might be happening in the community, it's still a community, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I feel like this episode is such an interesting one because it's not like, well, here's what we need to do. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, or here's what it is, or here's what it's been historically. It's kind of like, well, like here's a conversation that we need to start having,
right,
and here are the things that we need to start thinking about. Yeah.
Yeah, we could maybe start a think tank.
Yeah, something like what would sustainability in mass look like to you, or what are maybe like what's maybe like your pushback against more sustainability, and then have somebody like speak back to like, you know, okay, well, I understand where you're coming from, but so for example, you said you made a comment about sustainability in mass, and somebody was talking about like reusing, they don't want no reuse panty or something.
Yes,
so
yeah.
like, can you just speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, and I threw it out there about, I think I've mentioned about reusing the concept of repair and reuse, right? And I threw it out there, and the comment was that, you know, nobody's going to reuse a bikini panty after playing mass. But, you know, of course, the person didn't really get where I was coming from, because, you know, I am more, you know, involved in sustainability, and I'm actually taking a master's in sustainable fashion right now, Master of Science. So I actually learned a lot too, you know, over the last 3 years or so. And even more so when I started Made Neo, it was really when I started reading and noticing so many things came to light, I think, during COVID too. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of stuff going on. I think a lot of uncovering of real horrible things that were going on. I think when the Rana Plaza fell to, I think over 1,000 people died, workers, sewers, seamstresses and stuff. Yeah, so unfortunately, if your air's not on the pulse with some things, you'll miss it. So I was quite respectful when I responded to that, saying, you know, the idea was about repairing and reusing other parts of the costume, and like from the moment of design, that the design should be considered something that's going to be reused. So, like for example, I made a bralette, right, that was made from fabric waste, but it's a fashion piece. Mm-hmm. And this bralette could be worn after Carnival, no problem. It's a fashion piece. It looked good. It is couture. You know, it's like, and so the intent is not to throw it away after. The intent is to reuse it. Mm-hmm. So when I talk about design, thinking about design, sustainability in design first, that's where you would start from the actual drawing of this. Who am I making this for? I'm making it for them to wear as a costume piece, but how can it be maybe partially deconstructed or some part removed that makes it a piece that's functional after the Carnival days?
I love that idea. And I think that would be amazing to see more of that, because a lot of these costumes are so beautiful, and it would actually be really awesome to have like an opportunity to wear it again. And I know some people do, again, like I said, rewear wire bras and stuff like that. But like if it was made for that purpose, like, I wear it on Carnival Day, and then a week from now when you go on the boat cruise or whatever, if you tie this way instead, then you have a brand new, made Neo.
Yeah.
That would be so awesome. Like, I'm not sure if there's any like last things that you wanted to mention or anything, but I feel like this has just been such a eye-opening conversation, because I felt like, we were just going to talk about sustainability and mass in terms of like the design and stuff, but then it's like we start thinking all the way back to production and all these areas of where there is no sustainability right now, but there is an opportunity to do so.
Yeah. So, I mean, the last thing I would say is that I really want to thank you for having me, and thank you for doing this. I think you're doing great work, and however I could support you, let me know, because I love to see young people taking on this kind of responsibility, because it is a responsibility you probably didn't even think of.
Yeah, once you start, you can't stop.
Yeah, right? It's like, you didn't think about it like, oh, I'm going to do this because I'm responsible. No, you do it because you love it.
Yeah.
But in a way, it's speaking to a lot of young people who are from the Caribbean, who may not have exposure to our traditions and history of mass making and all of that, and so this is an opportunity to kind of continue the heritage and the traditions and the knowledge.
Yeah.
For future.
That's what I always say. Like, that's the reason why I started, is because my parents weren't able to pass that to me, right? So I got it from my grandmother, and now I have my own child, and I'm like, I need to be able to give him something. So let me go and learn, document, and share it as I go. And then if he wants to learn more, he just goes on YouTube or wherever, and he'll be able to find like more about JAB, more about when they started talking about making Carnival sustainable, when they were talking, you know what I mean? Like, a lot of times it's like, sometimes I don't even realize like the impact of the podcast, because I just feel like I'm just talking to you, right?
Yeah.
But it's like when we share that and we get like everybody else's energy involved and like the community involved, you start to see the impact that has. And it's so nice, because a lot of these people who are behind the scenes and not always highlighted for the work that they do or the impact that they're making in their own lane, they have an opportunity to now speak up and be seen, and for people to say like, oh my gosh, yes, I agree, or I completely disagree, or whatever, you know what I mean? And I think that's my favorite part, is just being able to have this space where we can talk, about the things that actually matter. Yeah. I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to talk about on this episode.
Just about the actual changing consumer habits. I think that Kiddies Carnival in Trinidad, Kiddies Carnival is the most creative carnival. It's so, and you have 14-year-olds, 13-year-olds playing, right?
Yeah.
And they're playing in beautiful costumes, like really well thought out, well designed. And then there's this stop that happens when they start playing Big People Mass, right? So we know from that there are a lot of young people who have been indoctrinated into mass playing. They know about mass playing and may not necessarily want that. Yeah, I think if we want to make help to change consumer patterns, I think a good place is to start with young people, and I'm talking about like with the Kiddies Carnival, and doing workshops and stuff where they get to understand about mass making and where it comes from and those traditions. I don't know if it's done. It's probably done. I'm not too sure.
I don't think it's happening like board wide or anything like that. Like, I know I've been in conversations with some, like with one school board and stuff like that, and they're trying to do more in that regard.
Right.
But I think it's just about, partnering with stakeholders and people who know about it, and then being able to have that like synergy happen, right? Like, I know some people were able to learn pan at their school, which I think is the coolest thing ever, because I never got to do that. But it's like finding these stakeholders and experts in the culture, and then connecting them with these people who are in these roles in these like institutions and schools and stuff like that, and then bridging that gap so that the young ones are able to come up with at least some foundation, Yeah. I think this was a really eye-opening episode, and I hope that it reaches whoever it needs to reach, you know what I mean, to be able to start to see that change. That would have a long-term positive impact, because I think when we kind of like shift our mind in terms of like what sustainability means and what it can look like, and it's not reusing somebody else's panty that they were,
Yes.
but no, that's not what it is. It actually can look like this or like that, or from production or from design. Like then it becomes like, oh, okay, well, that's not what I thought it was. And yeah, maybe that is possible. Right.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah.
I'm excited about sustainability now.
Yay.
And it was funny, we were chatting earlier. I was telling you about my jacket is from the thrift store, and like I buy stuff secondhand all the time.
Yeah.
But like I'm not thinking deep about like sustainability. I'm just kind of like it makes sense. Like there's nothing wrong with it.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
yeah. And for a lot of people, you know, Canada, there's some statistics. Value Village, they did there's actually a document that you could download that talks about the thrifting and the percentage of people and the trajectory and all of that. And in Canada, thrifting is huge.
Okay.
It's quite big. It's growing.
Yeah.
So that's another thing too, that, you know, if you look at the trends in the market, this is a trend. And it's been happening for a while, but it's growing exponentially. Right?
What if there was like a secondhand store for Carnival items specifically?
There you go.
Like, oh, you don't want your backpack? Come drop it off.
Yeah.
Come drop it off for us. We'll resell it for you.
Resell
or
it,
rework it. And
yeah, I mean, that business model will have to be plugged into the you know, the actual parade and the costume. Yeah, I mean, I think there are a number of ways it could happen, right?
Yeah. Well, it's cool to start thinking about it, because then you start to get the ideas coming, and it's like, oh wait, like this might actually be more possible than we first thought it was, you know? Because sometimes the word like sustainability and like these things can be a little bit intimidating, because it's like, whoa, that's not new. Yeah, like that's not new. Like it's dirty. It's this. It's like, no, it's actually not. Like as soon as I buy myself from the thrift store, I just put it in the washing machine.
Exactly.
And that's it.
Yeah.
You
and
know?
it means a lot more. It's about production. It's about people. It's about fair wages. It's about, you know, so it's quite broad. So when we take all of those pieces into consideration, you've got to feel it here, you know, like, oh, this is connected to me. You know, I'm connected to it, you know, in some way. Or you may have an emotion when you start thinking about it that holistically.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yay.
I'm excited. Thank you so much for being here with me. This was a really fun episode. And again, I hope that it like reaches the hearts and minds that it needs to, in the way that it needs to, because it definitely had like an impact on me to start thinking more about sustainability and what that could look like. So thank you so much for being here and chatting with me.
Thanks for having me.